If you can't rely on the man sitting next to you, you shouldn't get in the boat in the first place. The Damned was written and directed by Thorder Paulson. His name is Thorder Paulson. His name is Thorder Paulson, who did the Valhalla Murders and other projects, and was also written by Jamie Hannigan, who's done a few projects including The Woman in the Wall, where the men can see it all. And it stars Odessa Young, who is in Shirley, The Order, and Assassination Nation. A very good movie, a very underappreciated movie, and I'm going to keep plugging the fact this movie exists anytime anybody from Assassination Nation happens to be in a movie. Odessa Young, though, she's pretty good, and also Hari Neff. Glad she got to be in Barbie, and if you have a problem with Hari Neff and living the way she does, that's your fault. That being said, Odessa Young, who again, in Assassination Nation, lives in an Icelandic village that's sort of idyllic, except for the fact that there are very, very harsh winters going on in the 19th and a half century. Oh, I had this silly concept in reverse. Where, yeah, it's a fishing village every day like the one before, but the winters are getting harsher, and the provisions are no more. Bonjour, 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 bonjour. And they have a few other people in this village that seemingly has like 12 citizens. I mean, I understand that villages aren't supposed to be metropolises, but dear God, I mean, like 12 people, it really isn't all that much to feed, but nevertheless, the most famous of any of the other actors is probably Rory McCann, who was in Game of Thrones. He plays Ragnar. That's just a hilarious name. I thought it was Rygar, and I thought we were going to go with him using a disc armor for a weapon. I'm just going to keep making random references here, because really, once I get into the plot, you'll understand why. There's Joe Cole, baby, as Daniel, who is he's one of the smarter ones of the village. Again, this village of about 12 people. There's Helga, Sabian Finneran, and Lewis Grimman plays Jonas. And there are a few other people. And basically the idea is Ava, Alvita Zane, is leading the charge, sort of. I mean, she's kind of well respected because her husband Marcus ended up passing away. That's not really a spoiler because they reveal it right away. And she is trying to help with the provisions, trying to, nurse them along and everything until, the spring comes along and then things can go well. And I would question why in the world they moved to this particular hamlet. I understand wanting to have your own place, but really, I don't know much about Iceland, but it doesn't look like it would be all that fun to deal with in the winter or the summer, especially when a lamb creature is running around. Watch Lamb, by the way. Nevertheless, suddenly, after, debating about this and going over some folklore stuff, Helga in particular, the village elder, who looked like she was around when Iceland was first discovered. Same with Zoe Stark. Let's start with the random references. Let's go to the fact that they see a shipwrecked crew in the distance. I mean, close enough for them to get there as far as, boats and everything. But they don't have that many provisions. They don't want to starve. And, fishing is difficult, especially in the winter and all that. So the decision is made to not help. That has some dire consequences. From there, we have a folklore, horror movie type thing with a bit of the Vivitch. Yes, I know it's called The Witch and the Fog, and a few other things with a slow burn to the point that they forgot to turn the burner on. And look, I'm not going to mix words here. I drove 35 miles to go watch this because it was the earliest show that I could see, and I had some other errands to run, and I paid a few bucks to watch it because I'm all about supporting, indie horror films or indie films in general if I can. And while I certainly like Odessa Young and I thought there was some potential here, the concept ended up just beating me down because it was a bare bones concept. It wasn't really frightening even as a story, because a story is stuff that we've seen time and time before in better movies and more well, put together movies. In movies where you really aren't just relying on a cast, talented as they may be, to carry something that just isn't that interesting. There is a name for this particular evil called the Drago. And I thought we were going to go with the Dagon because I thought maybe we were going to go Lovecraftian here. We don't. There is eventually a bit of a payoff to this, but it's just not much of a payoff. And despite Odessa Young trying to carry this thing and the others doing their best, none of the characters are interesting. You don't feel any sympathy for any of the people when they do bad things or stuff ends up happening to them. It just ends up being kind of basic. The Damned is in theaters if you want to check it out. Probably will be on Shudder pretty soon, or a horror streaming service soon. Anyway, getting the spoilers. 3, 2, 1. Spoilers. So basically the idea is the shipwreck crew, by not helping them, they end up having some guilt and some other stuff. It's like karma coming to get them. Like, you know, their selfishness, so to speak, they're, you know, wanting to just rely on themselves and help themselves ends up costing them, because the guilt eats at them and other stuff eats at them. By not helping your fellow man, it ends up costing you. At least I think that's the point of the movie. Basically everybody just pretty much goes mad. Daniel eventually goes mad after teaching, you know, Ava how to shoot. You know, by not shooting it in the goddamn house, but she's seen stuff. She saw, like, you know, somebody that was underneath this goddamn little wooden partition. Helga tells the story about these two brothers. One that ends up dying. The other brother marries the brother's wife. And then there's like the thing, oh, here's a knock at the door, send somebody to go see, they don't come back, sends the wife to go see, she doesn't come back, and so on and so forth, kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen. The more people that go out to search for what's going on, or search for food, or do all this, it's going to come back to bite them. Now, there are a couple decent moments. There's a part where they find some meat in a barrel, seemingly from either that shipwreck or another shipwreck. There is one point where they find a whole bunch of the bodies, and there is one part where the guy's stomach is gurgling. They cut it open, there's guts, and a couple of shrieking eels. That actually was a kind of a nice moment, I'll say that much. And the idea is there's the old customs binding the corpses, hammering nails into their feet so they can't walk around, they can't do all this stuff and whatever. Again, it sounds more interesting laid out that way than it ends up playing out. And basically the idea is, you know, okay, all these people died on this particular crew. The guilt is haunting them. People are being offed one by one. They're either offing themselves in the sense of Daniel, or Giannis ends up getting killed because Daniel just goes absolutely insane. Other people go nuts. There's this one guy gets hit in the back of the hammer, or back of the hammer with a head. That would be some talent. Back in the back of the head with a hammer. And it just basically whittles down to Ava and a few others. Helga ends up going missing. They go to find her. She's seen this very creepy figure that's kind of shrouded in mystery with, like, stringy hair and stuff like that. And Helga even telling the story of, like, the two brothers, like, you know, there was nothing there. Just, you know, seaweed, just, you know, stank seaweed and rotting meat. And basically they end up going into the mountains nearby to try and figure out where the provision, because they had provisions and then suddenly they were gone. They found a bountiful fish, surplus, but then that was gone. So all these things are gone because, again, the karma and all this stuff is, you know, ended up biting them in the ass. They go into the mountains. One ends up dying. Ava ends up, you know, freaking out and everything. Sees a couple, hears about a couple other people. All this stuff is going on. And then eventually she ends up, basically coming face to face with this great evil. Now, there was something a little bit earlier about her husband Marcus actually, you know, proposing to her, and he would have a compass. And if she said no, then he would need the compass to get home because he would be lost without her. It's cheesy. It's kind of adorable, though. It is kind of adorable. I would try that, except I don't know how to fucking use a compass. That being said, I don't even know how to use your compass or my compass. So, nevertheless, let's move on from that. Basically, she comes face to face with this evil. And there is one person that, you know, survived that shipwreck. She shoots this evil, burns the thing down because that's what Helga said. You got to burn this whole thing down. You got to do all this stuff. But it turns out she was seeing things. This evil got in her head. These thoughts got in her head. And it was actually the one surviving person of this particular shipwreck that she shot. He spoke another language. I don't know if it's Spanish or what. I don't have a fucking clue. And yeah, that ends up happening. And then that's the end of the movie. That's literally where it ends. Yeah, that's The Damned. This movie needs to be damned to, like, you know, the pit of being forgotten. The first movie of 2025, released in 2025 that I saw, and oh boy, there was potential here. It was squandered. Odessa Young, bless her. There were attempts to try and make this interesting. It just wasn't. I don't mind slow burn. I don't mind films that take their time. I don't mind films that have this over, you know, this feeling of, like, this over, you know, feeling of dread. It just didn't work. It gets an F. I'm sorry. It's just not that good. So, nevertheless, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.